Holding Supreme Court Justice called for repeal of Second Amendment. We Can't Let This Happen by Frank Lee for DailyVine.com. Things are heating up after the mass shooting at Parkland High School in Florida. Revved the ignition of the anti-gun movement and spawned the March for Our Lives protest as a wicked chess move by the Democratic Party. Students from or in support of those at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School marched and held up signs that displayed numerous false narratives, inaccurate sayings, and simply lacked facts. The movement has sparked a national debate about gun control, exploitation of children to push an agenda, and now something else has crawled out of the liberal bag of tricks. This next trick, performed by retired Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens, has some Americans questioning the Second Amendment. The rest of the country is questioning the man's sanity, but that comes as part and parcel of proposing radicalized scenarios that punish the law-abiding citizens of America. Former Justice Stevens talked about repealing the Second Amendment. He's a 97-year-old and targeted the National Rifles Association in his writings, suggestion in hopes to weaken the gun club and block those who wish to form a force against those who wish to control guns. In other words, it sounds like former Justice Stevens would like to participate in knocking on doors and confiscating guns from people who've committed no crime, rendering families defenseless against enemies, foreign and domestic, mostly domestic, of course. Many people claim that speaking for gun control is not a gun grab, but that's ultimately what many people worry about. Every step of gun control can lead closer to gun confiscation. If that ever happens, then the only people who have guns would be criminals and the government. Every day, hardworking Americans would be left defenseless towards any intruders or criminals trying to harm or rob them. NPR reported more on Justice Stevens in an op-ed in Tuesday's New York Times. The 97-year-old Stevens writes that a constitutional amendment to get rid of the Second Amendment would do more to weaken the NRA's ability to stymie legislative debate and block constructive gun control legislation than any other available option. The Second Amendment states that a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Stephen called that concern a relic of the 18th century and says repealing it would eliminate the only legal rule that protects sellers of firearms in the United States. Stevens, who retired from court in 2010, had 2 years earlier dissented in District of Columbia versus Heller, which determined the Second Amendment allowed an individual right to bear arms. Stevens says he remains convinced that decision was wrong and debatable and provided the National Rifle Association with a propaganda weapon of immense power. Stevens' call for repeal of the Second Amendment goes further than most gun control advocates, many of whom have called for banning certain types of weapons and establishing stricter background checks and age limits, but for not changing the Constitution. Many gun owners won't mind banning certain people from gaining weapons, but not all people or guns should be banned. With the staggering amount of guns in the country and gun owners who commit no crimes, there's no point to punish those who have done no wrong while allowing the criminals to run freely with their weapons. Criminals don't follow laws, and they won't follow any sort of repeal done to the Second Amendment. It's not likely possible that a major gun grab could even happen because the number of guns in America would be seemingly impossible to collect. The number of people who would resist a gun grab would ultimately fight back with the government and spark a major civil war. one which no God-loving American would appreciate. The only people who would benefit from a gun grab are criminals who don't follow the law, which would put many people in danger as the criminals do as they please, knowing that people are unable to protect themselves. Former Justice Stevens must not remember that criminals don't follow laws, that people would be in danger if the only people who had the weapons are the criminals and the government, who could do whatever they want to citizens at that point. In the 1930s, saw Hitler come to power and disarm people. He was a gun grabber who convinced thousands of people to commit horrible crimes. What they did after disarming the Jewish population was one of the most horrifying events in history. It was so bad that people cannot even let that happen again, and to disarm the public would be one of the worst ideas that could ever happen in America. Americans who follow laws deserve to purchase weapons if that's what they like to do. Americans with mental health conditions, criminal backgrounds, or even questionable backgrounds should probably not be permitted to purchase weapons. If people can't follow the laws or suffer from mental health issues, then arming them is not a good idea, and it's something that everyone can agree with. Disarming everyone for the crimes of the few is not something anyone should ever agree on. Totally agree with that. Absolutely. Where did this judge, 97-year-old judge, come from? He's probably an Obama appointee, definitely. Yeah, you can see him in the picture here with Obama. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And again, thank you so much for watching.